On this special edition of Less Than 2000, we have Dokken superfan Sam Fischer in studio discussing 80s hair bands. Sam's love for Dokken's founding member George Lynch runs deep. He travels half a dozen times a year to see him play, has a personal handcrafted guitar made by Lynch, gets involved in most of the fan groups, and has a true affinity for the music that kept a generation rocking in the 80s.
Less Than 2000.
The podcast.
You know, were you ever really into hair bands?
Does Metallica count?
No. What about Guns N' Roses? Are they a hair band?
Well, yeah. They have the long hair.
Metallica has long hair. Every metal band has long hair. It's hair bands, as in big poofy Aqua Net hair. It's the big poofy, you can't just have long hair and be a hair band.
Whoa. You mean to tell me that the long hair isn't what distinguishes hair bands? That it's something different? I thought that's what it was.
It's the big hair. It's not long hair in general. It's the big hair. It's the big permed out, fluffed out, blow dried, blonde, girly type hair from the 80s.
So you mean to tell me that all these times that I'm like at parties saying I'm going to put on some 80s hair bands and then put on like Guns N' Roses or Metallica, secretly everybody thought I was a frickin' noob?
Yeah, exactly. You are a noob. I think that was the reason I didn't really get into hair bands, is because it was all about the big hair and the tight pants, and just, man, some of those singers, I don't know how they ever got women in the 80s, like with their fashion and stuff. Because of the image, I never really gave it a chance and never really sat down and appreciated that style of music.
Clearly there's a world where people love this music. I think we just missed it because, we came in on like Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre and stuff.
Jeez. Yes, that's exactly right.
All right, so we're sitting here today with Sam Fischer, who's a really good friend of mine and an absolute longtime Dokken fanatic. And, rumor has it you also have George Lynch on speed dial. Is this true?
Well, I don't think there is speed dial anymore, Chad, but yes, I have his number on my cell phone.
I just dated myself.
You really did.
Holy cow. Okay, your Fave 5. Is he in your Fave 5?
What's that?
That's an old thing, too. Nobody does that anymore.
I didn't know you could do that.
So I double dated myself.
Yeah, that was about 10 years ago.
Okay, all right. Whoops, my bad.
Who has limited minutes and stuff anyway? Right. Unlimited calls to your Fave 5. So yeah, okay. So neither of us are very well versed in the subject that we're talking about today, and we wanted to do it justice. We didn't just want to wing it. I didn't want to just look up a bunch of crap on Wikipedia, as I usually do, but that's just to supplement the stuff that I'm an expert in.
Oh, that's great.
But today we're talking about 80s hair bands, and specifically Dokken, and we've got an expert right here. We brought in an expert, somebody who has George Lynch's guitar and George Lynch in his Fave 5 or speed dial, a true expert. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Well, I appreciate it.
So explain to people who George Lynch is.
George Lynch is a guitar player best known for his work done in the band Dokken in the 80s, but he's been around since the 70s. In the 70s, there were 3 guitar players that are very well known to people in the LA scene from like 75 to 77, 78-ish. There's tons of bands and tons of guitar players back in the era, but there are 3 that came out of the era with great success. One was Edward Van Halen, one was George Lynch, and the other was Randy Rhoads. And Randy Rhoads was, of course, the guitar player for Ozzy Osbourne, who tragically got killed in a plane crash. Of those 3, George Lynch is the only one that is still relevant today as far as music. In the last decade, George Lynch has worked on several projects and produced 18 albums.
How did you get to know him?
I had won a contest, and on Facebook, they just said the first 5 people to reply to this are going to get a phone call from George Lynch. Boom, I was on it, and so
nice.
He actually called me, and we had a conversation, and it kind of went from there.
Before we get, we're gonna take a deep dive into Dokken because we've got an expert here. But before we do that, can we zoom out and take sort of a bird's eye view and talk about the genre in general? Sure. As our expert on 80s hair bands. First of all, is
Poison sucks. That's what.
Well, first of all, is hair bands is that an offensive term? Is that
it is to it actually is to a lot of those guys from that era. It is to a guy by the name of Eddie Trunk, who's a big, that kind of represents that era still. It's offensive because there are a lot of good bands that came out of the era that were very good, like Dokken, but it became a parody, and it became bands were being signed based on what they were wearing and what they look like, how much Aqua Net extra hold they had in their hair
Aqua Net.
versus their actual music talent. And so I think a lot of the guys from that era, Lynch has said, the 80s were defined by two things, the punk scene and the hair band scene. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I think the punk scene will probably be better well known as history goes on. But I'm here to disagree with that today.
What do they call it then? If not hairband, is it metal?
I just think they call it, I think Dokken likes to be referred to as just straight ahead bluesy rock and roll. They were heavily influenced by the Beatles. So I just think that it's rock and roll.
We're going to go with hairbands today, though, because that's going to be a catchy title for the episode.
Hairband. Yeah, because you're trolling everybody.
No, we got to use hairbands. I think that most
I'm not
people
ashamed
call
of it. I grew up in that era. I never had long hair. I didn't have the Aqua Net, but it was a great time to be alive in the 80s. It was awesome.
How did Sam fall in love with rock and roll, and very specifically, Dokken?
Well, I fell in love with rock and roll. True story. I was 12 years old, and my friend Denny from Valentine, Nebraska's garage, and we were tearing apart a mini bike. I mean, how cliche is this whole story going down so far? But we were tearing apart his motorcycle, and I heard this music coming from his boombox. And for those of you who don't know what a boombox is, it's a big box that was sitting on their garage floor.
Okay, now I'm going to stop you there. That's unfair. We know boomboxes.
You do? Okay.
I had a boombox.
He's condescending like me, assuming that our listeners don't know what these things are.
Okay,
that is
was it a ghetto blaster?
It was a ghetto ass blaster, and it was
big gray one.
But it was blasting music that I had, but it was blasting music that I had never heard. It was incredible what I was hearing, and so I literally got down and looked upside down through the little window, and it said AC/DC Back in Black, and I thought, holy
yes.
So that's what got me started. As far as getting me started on Dokken, I was in high school, and I was kind of known as a rock and roll kid, and a preppy friend of mine said, well, I assume you got that new Dokken, it's that's what everybody's talking about. And I go, of course I do, Dan. And then I proceeded to the store to get it, and so I have to
always lie to your friends.
Exactly.
I absolutely have that.
Yeah, I'm cool. Yeah, so
of course nowadays it's a lot easier to get access. You go, yeah, of course I know of that, and you already have it pulled up on your phone.
Exactly.
One of the reasons we had you on is to go deep with this stuff, because it was never my cup of tea. Probably because I didn't have the memories of it. I don't have associated memories with it. Like Chad and I grew up with rap. That was our thing, and so we had that fondness for that. And later in the 90s, the rock and roll.
You remember that moment in time. It takes you back. It's such a strong feeling. It's like you smell your grandma's cinnamon rolls from 50 years ago, or whatever it is. It just takes you back. And
the first time you got laid.
Yeah, right.
Getting drunk in the back of a pickup.
It's okay. Wives don't listen to this show.
Well, my wife will listen to this show. So.
That's. We're talking 30 plus.
So yours will.
We're talking 30, 40, 35 or more years ago. Yeah, so I think that's okay.
No. But that's the same thing with me. I mean, we hear a song or we hear something, and it takes us. I can tell you where I was at. I tell you how much beer was in my can. I can tell you where I was on Main Street in Valentine, Nebraska. I mean, it's that clear to me.
That's what this show's about. Is like I see. It's not my jam, but I can feel it coming off of you. Just the nostalgia and the feeling of better times and the youth and the connection and the positive memories to all this
Everybody
stuff.
wants to be 17 again, bro.
She's only 17 is a great song. Is that Winger?
It is Winger. Their guitar player Reb Beach was replaced George Lynch and Dokken.
Really? Yeah. That was a great riff too. Mm-hmm. She's only 17 is a great guitar riff. It wasn't a creepy comment.
We could talk about Winger too, because they were a poor hair band that was destroyed by Beavis and Butthead.
You got a bad review on Beavis and Butthead.
I love Beavis and Butthead, but they single-handedly broke the band Winger. And I mean, because Stewart, the little nerd kid, had the Winger shirt, and then of course Beavis and Butthead had the AC/DC and Metallica shirt.
I want to kind of define what a hair band is and what isn't. Like, if I could just like, is Metallica in the same category as Dokken and Warrant and Scorpions? And
it's funny you should say that. No, they're not. And I mean, they're a thrash metal band. They're not a hair metal band. However, those guys from Slayer, Metallica, all those guys, they talk about in the 80s, you know, the Hollywood scene, the Rainbow, where all the girls were. They all made fun of those bands, and yet they were out watching those bands because that's the only way they were going to get laid. Yeah. I mean, so it's kind of funny.
You know, you're talking about your friend that still travels and went and saw the last show and all that. You still travel and whenever you can.
I do. I was supposed to see the Dokken and George Lynch mob is opening up for Dokken on the road. I probably go see George, 1 to 5 times a year.
But tell the story about the line of people waiting to get in to see him or to get an autograph.
Oh, the Dokken reunion shows.
Yeah.
We get into the photo line, and there's, the top 100 fans in the world there. As I walk into the photo line, George recognizes me and says, "Hey, Sam, you made it. Did you bring the guitar?" And and so all these fans behind me are like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And I'm standing there taking a photo, and when he said, "Did you bring the guitar?" my knees started to quake, because it was just like, what is happening here? I mean, I just thought he was BSing me, and so I walk away from the photo line, and George says, "Sam, text me." And all these fans are like, who that? And then all of a sudden, some of these Dokken fans were like, "Hey, how you doing?" And
all of a sudden, everyone wants to be your friend, and they didn't give two shits.
Yeah, they were cool about it, but yeah, I mean, so it was a experience of a lifetime.
It seemed very similar to the other 80s quote hair bands. Tell me what, if anything, stands out about Dokken specifically, and why that band as opposed to any other number of bands in this genre.
Well, I just think the pure musicianship from Dokken is different than some of the other bands. Those guys are very, very talented players who didn't just disappear. They're still all very relevant players. You have, Don's still with the band. He now owns
Don Dokken.
Don Dokken owns the franchise. It wasn't always that way.
The only member who's still the original member.
He bought the other guys out. And Wild McBrown retired. Wild McBrown, the drum player, is a fantastic singer that contributed to the 3-part harmony of Dokken. And Jeff Pilson is a produces many albums to this day, and is for the last 16 or 18 or 20 years has been the bass player and music director for Foreigner. So he's on the road a lot. I mean, I think Foreigner does 150 dates a year when they're out on the road. So, for a guy like Mick Jones to hire Jeff Pilson as the music director of one of the iconic bands of the 70s is really saying something. So I think, number one, the musicianship of those guys separates them. Number two, Lynch is such an influence on all these other guys. I mean, influenced guys like Warren DeMartini from Rat. Maybe to a lesser extent, he influences Jakey Lee. But all those players from that era, if you ask them, about George Lynch, they're all going to say, "Oh yeah." I mean, he was the guy who was voted 68th greatest guitar player of all time by Guitar World magazine, the 10th greatest metal player of all time by Guitar World magazine. So he's very, very well respected, and one of the most humble guys, by the way. He doesn't go around and flaunt that. But I just think the musicianship, the difference of Lynch's guitar playing, and then the chemistry of Don and George not getting along, and Mick and Jeff kind of holding it together. It's fascinating because they never agreed really necessarily on the musical direction of that band. You had Don, who was more influenced by stuff that was melodic, and you had George, who just wanted to be very edgy. So what you had was a very melodic band with an edge to it, and I think that's what makes Dokken different from that era.
You saw the birth of MTV. I saw MTV a few years in, where they were then still, it was like they'd throw back and play stuff.
When Carmen Electra and Ginny McCarthy were on Singled Out.
Singled Out.
That is the greatest show of all time. God. I actually YouTubed that the other day. I forgot how freaking awesome it was.
Sex in the 90s was another one that was very formative to us. So, you remember the first song played on MTV?
Yes, I do. It was Video Killed the Radio Star by the Bungles, right?
Yep.
I love how that's the first song that
Bungles,
ever played on MTV.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, let me just digress on this.
Sure.
So, Yes is another one of those bands that's been through so many phases. And there was that period in the 80s, 90215 and Big Generator, where they had
Owner of a
Trevor
Lonely
Rabin.
Heart.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was watching some of the Dokken videos, it looked a lot like 80s Yes, like with Trevor Rabin and the tight pants and the leopard print or tiger print and all that stuff.
No, maybe they influenced that. I don't know.
Definitely. Thoughts on 80s Yes?
It was very different to me. I liked Owner of a Lonely Heart. I wasn't into the 70s Yes. I have lots of friends that were or are. I found it to be depressing in the sense that this hair metal is all about partying, having a good time, and then you have that serious stuff, and maybe that's why I wasn't into Rush either.
Who would you consider to be the first hair band in this category? The first one to do this, what we think of as hair bands?
Probably Quiet Riot was the first one that was signed. They were signed before Motley Crue. I think it was probably Quiet Riot, then Motley Crue. Then you had people, artists from the 70s that started changing their look. I mean, Van Halen kind of changed their look, sort of. Then you had Scorpions. Band have been around since, I think, the late 60s. They were known as a hair band, Rock Me Like a Hurricane, but they've been around for years.
Who was it that you said some band sucks when we first started?
Poison.
Okay.
But hey, I was at I remember that first Poison album, Look What the Cat Dragged In, and I was in college, and I mean, if you wanted the girls to hang out, I was hanging out with my guy's room that played the guitar, and he wasn't playing Dokken songs. He was playing Poison songs. Sure. Why? Because there are like 15 girls in the room. I'm like, I'm gonna go check this out.
So what I'm understanding is back then it was Dokken was cool. If you wanted to get laid, it was Poison.
Pretty much, yeah. Def Leppard, by the way, is another band that fits into that. They were before hair band, then they kind of became a hair band, and now
pour some sugar on me.
Yeah, it's such a weak song.
Can't get into it.
You don't like that one? How about Around and Round by Rat?
It was great when it came out. I thought it was awesome. Yeah,
that's a great riff.
Man. Yeah. Actually, a little trivia: Warren DeMartini, he wrote that riff for Round and Round the same time that Jake E. Lee was writing the riff for Bark at the Moon for Ozzy. They were roommates. So a little trivia for you.
Was Dokken's biggest one in My Dreams? Was that what was their
probably
biggest?
Their most well-known song?
Sure.
Yeah.
The video has the rain. And
it's epic, bro.
And the blue screen and all that.
It's epic. And then Lynch,
I watched it. I remember that video.
When they show a close up of Lynch doing this run, which I've been trying to learn. It's insanely fast, and it's like a 7-fret stretch, and it's and for a lot of Dokken fans, that was the Ed Sullivan Show type moment for us. Like, whoa, look at this guy. I mean, he was incredible. I mean, just like, how does he play the guitar that fast? How does his fingers move that fast?
That is one thing that I noticed listening to this stuff is a lot of the hair band guitar solos are very kind of samey to me, like noodling, really fast playing. Right. But I did notice a difference with Lynch. Like it was more technically proficient. It was in the Van Halen category, rather than just Poison or Warrant. Or whatever.
And Lynch is not a school player, so he does not know what he's playing. I mean, he says he couldn't play a major chord for. It's like, well, actually, you can, George. You just don't know what it's called.
Right.
I mean, you're on that street, you just don't know where you're at.
Mm-hmm. No theory at all.
No, none. And he plays what's called the flatted fifth, which gives a lot of his stuff a little darker song. The flatted fifth, if you look it up, in medieval times, they would decapitate you if you played it because it's kind of an evil sounding thing.
Yeah.
And he bases a lot of his playing on the flatted fifth.
Is that the same as the Devil's Chord?
Yes, it is called the Devil's Chord.
Yeah.
And a thing called Gothic Octave, and he plays what are called shapes, but his feel and his legato and vibrato are unbelievable. He actually, I don't know if he invented it, but he inspired DeMartini and a bunch of players to do what's called the jack-off vibrato, which is kind of a violinist move or a bottleneck vibrato, and he only did that because he was trying to emulate Hendrix and he didn't know what the hell he was doing with his vibrato. So he kind of did this thing where he just swipes it, and nobody can play that like Lynch. I mean, I can't jump into his fingertips or his heart or his brain to make it sound like that. And that's what separates those great players. Lynch has a sound, and everybody knows he could play 3 notes and I know it's Lynch. I just know it's Lynch. And it's hard to describe, but he's got it. Whatever it is, he's got it.
Different times, man. The 80s, you got to have some like party. They got to have some wild parts.
Everybody was on coke back then, man.
They just getting kicked out of hotels and setting things on fire. And
there's a great story that Lynch told last summer about Eddie Trunk did a show from the Rainbow Bar and Grill is a famous place. And Lynch tells a story about, in the mid 80s sometime that he pulls up him and his drug dealer were in his Pantera, and they just got busted by the cops for tequila and guns and all this shit. Couldn't believe that they let him go. And so he gets in a fight at the Rainbow over some stripper named Bambi. And, of course. So the cops come and see him, and he's arrested and thrown in a cop car. And Lynch is like, Miles, get me out of the car. And sure enough, this Mexican kid let him out of the car, and he ran up into Hollywood Hills there. I mean, literally with dogs chasing the helicopter.
No way.
The guy he's with had like cut up by Constantine wire. They're climbing through these fences and stuff, and just total rock and roll. Well, the great part about that story is, fast forward 30 plus years, and he's in this band called Lynch Mob, and his drummer is a guy by the name of Jimmy DeAnda. Well, it turns out, and DeAnda goes up the mic and tells that story. He goes, "I was that 13-year-old kid." It's just crazy.
Get out of here. That's amazing.
It is awesome.
And they never had that conversation before that?
No, I guess not.
Wow.
Yeah.
He didn't remember? Hey, dude, like,
he goes, "You remember that, George?" He's like, "Yeah." He goes, "That was you?" Yeah, that was me, George. Because DeAnda...
he didn't know that he was a rock and roll star.
Right. DeAnda knew who George Lynch was, because he said, my buddy and I were 13, 14 hanging out, and I was like, "Dude, that's George Lynch in the cop car." So we let George Lynch out of the cop car. Set George free.
That's amazing.
The favorite one I listened to, "Walk Away," was I thought the most powerful of the ones I saw.
It's incredible.
Great song, great video. The snake on the drums, and
so that location, I guess, was the Mansons somehow were involved with that house. There's literally animal blood on the wall still, and just a freaky, great location. But anyway, that song is. It's ironic because they were technically broken up when they did that. It was an obligation they had to do, and it's just the whole story of Dokken is tragic, because they were looking at $1 million they were about to go to the next level, which is the arena level, and they weren't talking. And Don and George got in a famous fist fight in a limo that year, and I mean, it's just, they weren't talking, and George and everybody was on drugs except for Don. He was just on alcohol and Valium, and they weren't talking, and that was the end of it. I mean, millions of dollars were left on the table, and egos got involved, drugs got involved, and ultimately nobody made any damn money after that, because George and Don both did albums, and Don couldn't use his name because the other guys sued him.
Sure.
Like, you can't use the Dokken name because we own 3/4 of this band.
Yeah.
So Don had to do an album under the Don Dokken label. So he did that, and then George did his first Lynch Mob album, which is highly revered.
I see you brought Dokken Into the Fire, the book by James Curl. Now, you actually know the author of this book.
Well,
right?
I don't know him.
Well, you've talked
because
to him
he reached
times.
out. Yeah, I've talked to him via social media. Nice guy.
Nice. Tell us about the book. Just, I mean, like, what? Because I know there's huge fans out there, and some of them may not know all the stories that are in this book and things like that. But is there anything you'd want to share about what's in there and what fans?
Well,
would want to
I
know?
just think if you're a fan, you need to read it and know that only Don and Jeff were interviewed for the book, and then George apparently did give 2 interviews for it, and then he pulled out.
Well, speaking of which, we need you to sign a release.
Yeah, we don't want you pulling out.
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's a really awkward time to bring this up. By the way, we're sending you a legal document.
I'm not saying anything that isn't public information in this book. So anyway, but it's a book that I highly recommend for Dokken fans, because he does a good job of taking. I mean, because nowadays you can research stuff based on, these guys have done a ton of interviews on YouTube over the years, and he kind of puts it all together. And there are 2 or 3 things in that book that I did not know before. So.
And that's coming from a super fan.
Yeah, I think so.
So the fact that you're a super fan and you still learn something from the book says that James did some deep dive.
He did a good job.
Let's see that guitar. So you brought a guitar. Would you mind busting that out and showing the audience?
I'm sure here live on air.
Yeah, live.
we should be creating video content by now, but let's.
George Lynch made this for me.
Made it for
by
George.
hand, yeah.
No, that's what I mean. This is a custom-made guitar
Whoa!
by George Lynch,
Oh my
specifically
God.
for
So,
Sam.
It's called the Snake Hunter. It's the fourth one he's made.
Here, hold on. Speak it into the
Oh,
mic.
sorry, it's the fourth one he's made, but you see the snake head there down there, and you've got
Don't break it, Adam.
the detail
I
of
know, I'm scared.
the rattles and the skulls and this is his famous guitar is called his Tiger, so it's based on the motif of the tiger, which he just sold for $125,000, by the way.
Wow! I mean,
And he's played it on stage several times, and I've got videos.
you can feel the energy on it, man. You
Yeah,
can feel the energy.
it's an incredible guitar.
What are the fret markers are like fangs?
Fangs, yeah, and
And-
stainless steel frets, which most guitars are nickel frets.
And this is real snakeskin, or what?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
When he first did it, he actually, I think, captured the snakes himself. So it's very organic. He did it all by hand. I've got a video of him before he shipped it out. He played it for me and, confirmed that it was serial number 68 and blah, 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 blah.
Mr. Scary.
Mr. Scary Guitars. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing this. Thanks for
Sure.
busting it out.
Yeah.
And it does have that tiger, print.
It's tiger motif on it.
That-
So all this stuff, he finds these little bones in the desert and
I mean, he literally
And
just
then-
makes that in his backyard and then
this,
send it to
this,
you.
headstock is what he calls the hooker headstock. It's kind of unique. I'm a huge Dokken fan, and it's not who defines me, but I'm not defined by Dokken, but it's a big, big part of my life. And what do you say to your heroes when you meet them? And all I could say to all of them was, thanks for the music. I mean, thank you. I sent Lynch an email on New Year's Eve and said, here are my top 20 songs my top songs that you've written in the last decade. And I think he actually appreciated it. He replied right away and said, well, thanks. I forgot about some of those, and it's a very interesting list. And, it's just to have that opportunity to have your heroes just to respond to something like that. It's just something you remember forever.